it's Miss Hunt again, back with another couple chapters of Matilda. So just a little recap for all of my friends who need to catch up just a little bit. Yesterday we read chapters 1 through 3, and basically how the story goes is Matilda's parents are not very supportive, not very kind to her, but she is a brilliant young girl and she really, really loves to read books. Her father, after saying some mean things to her, she decided she wants to get even with him. So she's been playing some tricks on him. Yesterday, she put super glue in his hat, and then her mom had to yank it off his head and snip it off. Today, we're going to read 2 more chapters. So we're going to read The Ghost, chapter 4, to start. There was comparative calm in the Wormwood household for about a week after the superglue episode. The experience had clearly chastened Mr. Wormwood, and he seemed temporarily to have lost his taste for boasting and bullying. Then suddenly he struck again. Perhaps he had a bad day in the garage and had not sold enough crummy second-hand cars. There are many things that make a man irritable when he arrives home from work in the evening, and a sensible wife will usually notice the storm signals and will leave him alone until he simmers down. When Mr. Wormwood arrived back from the garage that evening, his face was as dark as a thundercloud, and somebody was clearly for the high jump pretty soon. His wife recognized the signs immediately and made herself scarce. He then strode into the living room. Matilda happened to be curled up in an armchair in the corner, totally absorbed in a book. Mr. Wormwood switched on the television. The screen lit up. The program blared. Mr. Wormwood glared at Matilda. She hadn't moved. She had somehow trained herself by now to block her ears to the ghastly sound of the dreaded box. She kept right on reading, and for some reason, this infuriated her father. Perhaps his anger was intensified because he saw her getting pleasure from something that was beyond his reach. "Don't you ever stop reading?" he snapped at her. "Oh, hello, Daddy," she said pleasantly. "Did you have a good day?" "What is this trash?" he said, snatching the book from her hands. And there's her dad snatching the book away. "It isn't trash, Daddy. It's lovely. It's called The Red Pony. It's by John Steinbeck, an American writer. Why don't you try it? You'll love it." "Filth," Mr. Wormwood said. "If it's by an American, it's certain to be filth. That's all they write about." "No, Daddy, it's beautiful. Honestly, it is. It's about—" "I don't want to know what it's about," Mr. Wormwood barked. "I'm fed up with your reading anyway. Go and find yourself something useful to do." With frightening suddenness, he now began ripping the pages out of the book in handfuls and throwing them in the wastepaper basket. Matilda froze in horror. The father kept going. There seemed little doubt that the man felt some kind of jealousy. "How dare she?" he seemed to be saying with each rip of the page. "How dare she enjoy reading books when he couldn't? How dare she?" "That's a library book," Matilda cried. "It doesn't belong to me. I have to return it to Mrs. Phelps." "Then you'll have to buy another one, won't you?" the father said, still tearing out the pages. "You'll have to save your pocket money until there's enough in the kitty to buy a new one for your precious Mrs. Phelps, won't you?" With that, he dropped the now empty covers of the book into the basket and marched out of the room, leaving the telly blaring. Most children in Matilda's place would have burst into floods of tears. She didn't do this. She sat there very still and white and thoughtful. She seemed to know that neither crying nor sulking ever got anyone anywhere. The only sensible thing to do when you are attacked is, as Napoleon once said, to counterattack. Matilda's wonderfully subtle mind was already at work devising yet another suitable punishment for the poisonous parent. The plan that was now beginning to hatch in her mind depended, however, upon whether or not Fred's parrot was really as good a talker as Fred made out. Fred was a friend of Matilda's. He was a small boy of 6 who lived just around the corner from her, and for days he had been going on about this great talking parrot his father had given him. So the following afternoon, as soon as Mrs. Wormwood had departed in her car for another session of bingo, Matilda set out for Fred's house to investigate. She knocked on his door and asked if he would be kind enough to show her the famous bird. There's her friend's parrot. Fred was delighted and led her up into his bedroom, where a truly magnificent blue and yellow parrot sat in a tall cage. "There it is," Fred said. "Its name is Chopper." "Make it talk," Matilda said. "You can't make it talk," Fred said. "You have to be patient. It'll talk when it feels like it." They hung around waiting. Suddenly, the parrot said, "Hello, hello, hello." It was exactly like the human voice. Matilda said, "That's amazing. What else can it say?" "Rattle my bones," the parrot said, giving a wonderful imitation of a spooky voice. "Rattle my bones." "He's always saying that," Fred told her. "What else can he say?" Matilda asked. "Oh, that's about it," Fred said. "But it is pretty marvelous, don't you think?" "It's fabulous," Matilda said. "Will you lend him to me just for one night?" "No," Fred said. "Certainly not." "I'll give you all my next week's pocket money," Matilda said. That was different. Fred thought about it for a few seconds. "All right, then," he said, "if you promise to return him tomorrow." Matilda staggered back to her own empty house, carrying the tall cage in both hands. There was a large fireplace in the dining room, and she now set about wedging the cage up the chimney and out of sight. This wasn't so easy, but she managed it in the end. "Hello, hello, hello," the bird called down to her. "Hello, hello." "Shut up, you nut," Matilda said, and she went out to wash the soot off her hands. That evening, while the mother and the father and the brother and Matilda were having supper as usual in the living room in front of the television, a voice came loud and clear from the dining room across the hall. "Hello, hello, hello," it said. "Harry," cried the mother, turning white. "There's someone in the house. I heard a voice." "So did I," the brother said. Matilda jumped up and switched off the telly. "Shh," she said. "Listen." They all stopped eating and sat there very tense, listening. "Hello, hello, hello," came the voice again. "There it is," cried the brother. "It's burglars," hissed the mother. "They're in the dining room." "I think they are," the father said, sitting tight. "Then go and catch them, Harry," hissed the mother. "Go out and collar them red-handed." The father didn't move. He seemed in no hurry to dash off and be a hero. His face had turned gray. "Get on with it," hissed the mother. "They're probably after the silver." The husband wiped his lips nervously with his napkin. "Why don't we all go and look together?" he said. "Come on, then," the brother said. "Come on, Mom." And before we flip the page, we'll look really quick. There's Matilda shoving the parrot up into the fireplace. "They're definitely in the dining room," Matilda whispered. "I'm sure they are." The mother grabbed a poker from the fireplace. The father took a golf club that was standing in the corner. The brother seized a table lamp, ripping the plug out of its socket. Matilda took the knife that she had been eating with, and all 4 of them crept towards the dining room door, the father keeping well behind the others. "Hello, hello, hello," came the voice again. "Come on," Matilda cried, and she burst into the room, brandishing her knife. "Stick 'em up," she yelled. "We've caught you." The others followed her, waving their weapons. Then they stopped. They stared around the room. There was no one there. "There's no one here," the father said, greatly relieved. "I heard him, Harry," the mother shrieked, still quaking. "I distinctly heard his voice. So did you." "I'm certain I heard him," Matilda cried. "He's in here somewhere." She began searching behind the sofa, behind the curtains. Then came the voice once again, soft and spooky this time. "Rattle my bones," it said, "rattle my bones." So there's them looking for the burglar. And there's Matilda's father way behind the rest of them, because he's kind of scared. They all jumped, including Matilda, who was a pretty good actress. They stared around the room. There was still no one there. "It's a ghost," Matilda said. "Heaven help us," cried the mother, clutching her husband around the neck. I know it's a ghost, Matilda said. I've heard it here before. This room is haunted. I thought you knew that. Save us, the mother screamed, almost throttling her husband. I'm getting out of here, the father said, grayer than ever now. They all fled, slamming the door behind them. The next afternoon, Matilda managed to get a rather sooty and grumpy parrot down from the chimney and out of the house without being seen. She carried it through the back door and ran with it all the way to Fred's house. Did it behave itself? Fred asked her. We had a lovely time with it, Matilda said. My parents adored it. And that's the end of chapter 4. Let's go ahead and move on to chapter 5, arithmetic. Matilda longed for her parents to be good and loving and understanding and honorable and intelligent. The fact that they were none of these things was something that she had to put up with. It was not easy to do so, but the new game she had invented of punishing one or both of them each time they were beastly to her made her life more or less bearable. Being very small and very young, the only power Matilda had over anyone in her family was brain power. For sheer cleverness, she could run rings around them all, but the fact remained that any 5-year-old girl in any family was always obliged to do as she was told, however crazy the orders might be. Thus, she was always forced to eat her evening meals out of TV dinner trays in front of the dreaded box. She always had to stay alone on weekday afternoons, and whenever she was told to shut up, she had to shut up. Her safety valve, the thing that prevented her from going round the bend, was the fun of devising and dishing out these splendid punishments. And the lovely thing was that they seemed to work, at any rate for short periods. The father in particular became less cocky and unbearable for several days after receiving a dose of Matilda's magic medicine. The parrot in the chimney affair quite definitely cooled both parents down a lot, and for over a week they were comparatively civil to their small daughter. But alas, this couldn't last. The next flare-up came one evening in the sitting room. Mr. Wormwood had just returned from work. Matilda and her brother were sitting quietly on the sofa, waiting for their mother to bring in the TV dinners on a tray. The television had not yet been switched on. In came Mr. Wormwood in a loud checked suit and yellow tie. The appalling broad orange and green check of the jacket and trousers almost blinded the onlooker. He looked like a low-grade bookmaker dressed up for his daughter's wedding, and he was clearly very pleased with himself this evening. He sat down in an armchair and rubbed his hands together and addressed his son in a loud voice. Well, my boy, he said, your father's had a most successful day. He is a lot richer tonight than he was this morning. He has sold no less than 5 cars, each one at a tidy profit. Sawdust in the gearboxes, the electric drill on the speedometer cables, a splash of paint here and there, and a few other clever tricks, and the idiots were all falling over themselves to buy. He fished a bit of paper from his pocket and studied it. Listen, boy, he said, addressing the son and ignoring Matilda. Seeing as you will be going into this business with me one day, you've got to know how to add up the profits you make at the end of each day. Go and get yourself a pad and a pencil, and let's see how clever you are. The son obediently left the room and returned with the writing materials. Write down these figures, the father said, reading from his bit of paper. Car number 1 was bought by me for £278 and sold for $1,425. Got that? And just a second before we keep reading, remember we've talked about how they live in England, they don't live in America. So instead of spending dollars like we do in America, they spend what's called a pound. It's just an English dollar. Got that? The 10-year-old boy wrote the 2 separate amounts down slowly and carefully. Car number 2, the father went on, cost me £118 and sold for $760. Got it? Yes, Dad, the son said. I've got that. So there's the father telling his son how much he bought the cars for and sold them for, and he's writing them down on his pen pad. Car number 3 cost £111 and sold for £999.50. Say that again, the son said. How much did it sell for? 999 pounds and 50 pence, the father said. And that, by the way, is another of my nifty little tricks to diddle the customer. Never ask for a big round figure. Always just below it. Never say 1,000 pounds. Always say 999.50. It sounds like much less, but it isn't. Clever, isn't it? Very, the son said. You're brilliant, Dad. Car number 4 cost 86 pounds, a real wreck that was, and sold for 699 pounds 50. Not too fast, the son said, writing the numbers down. Right, I've got it. Car number 5 cost 637 pounds and sold for 1,649.50. You've got all those figures written down, son? Yes, Daddy, the boy said, crouching over his pad and carefully writing. Very well, the father said. Now work out the profit I made on each of the 5 cars and add them to the total. Then you'll be able to tell me how much money your rather brilliant father made altogether today. That's a lot of sums, the boy said. Of course it's a lot of sums, the father answered. But when you're in big business like I am, you've got to be hot stuff at arithmetic. I've practically got a computer inside my head. It took me less than 10 minutes to work the whole thing out. You mean you did it in your head, Dad? The son was goggling. Well, not exactly, the father said. Nobody could do that. But it didn't take me long. When you're finished, tell me what you think my profit was for the day. I've got the final total written down here, and I'll tell you if you're right. Matilda said quietly, Dad, you made exactly 4,303 pounds and 50 pence altogether. Don't butt in, the father said. Your brother and I are busy with high finance. But Dad... So, there's the dad, all proud of himself for his math skills. And there's Matilda, chiming in. Let's see if she's right. Shut it, the father said. Stop guessing and trying to be clever. Look at your answer, Dad, Matilda said gently. If you've done it right, it ought to be 4,303 pounds and 50 pence. Is that what you got, Dad? The father glanced down at the paper in his hand. He seemed to stiffen. He became very quiet. There was a silence. Then he said, Say that again. 4,303 pounds and 50 cents, Matilda said. There was another silence. The father's face was beginning to go dark red. I'm sure it's right, Matilda said. You little cheat, the father suddenly shouted, pointing at her with his finger. You looked at my bit of paper. You read it off from what I've got written here. Daddy, I'm on the other side of the room, Matilda said. How could I possibly see it? Don't give me that rubbish, the father shouted. Of course you looked. You must have looked. No one in the world could give the right answer just like that, especially a girl. You're a little cheat, madame. That's what you are, a cheat and a liar. At that point, the mother came in carrying a large tray on which were the 4 suppers. This time it was fish and chips, which Mrs. Wormwood had picked up in the fish and chip shop on her way home from bingo. It seemed that bingo afternoons left her so exhausted both physically and emotionally that she never had enough energy left to cook an evening meal. So, if it wasn't TV dinners, it had to be fish and chips. What are you looking so red in the face about, Harry? She said as she put the tray down on the coffee table. Your daughter's a liar and a cheat, the father said, taking his plate of fish and placing it on his knees. Turn the telly on and let's not have any more talk. So there's the father. He looks really mad. And there's Matilda. Poor girl. And that is the end of chapter 5. So that's where we're going to stop today, guys. I miss you so much. I hope you're having an amazing week. Bye.